live, hypothetically, with music, royalty free. I did the verifying and all that. We're testing out my new D&D content build. Grabbed a little frame off of the Google, something to kind of signify, something kind of aesthetic. But also due to the fact that it'll probably come up in conversation a lot. The sheer fact that, in my own world building in Dungeons and Dragons, and we'll get into the history of that soon here. Winter is definitely something I really appreciate from a world building standpoint. It changes, the condition of your world most of the time, and kind of provides sort of setting fodder and hard questions to ask yourself. What does your world do for winter? How does it prepare for winter, etc. So we're, like to keep that nice and aesthetic. That kind of fits my vibe. We're gonna keep it, pretty chill, really cool tones. But one thing that I'm very excited for with this channel in exploring my hobby is to kind of expand on my history with going into tabletops and researching and kind of trying to build my skills. Because I view Dungeons and Dragons and game mastering and dungeon mastering as kind of a craft in itself. I've done a lot of research into, YouTube. I follow several channels. I definitely make a constant and intense effort to always try to be learning from someone in some capacity. But I have noticed that a lot of the commentary, like a lot of the content creators, just a lot of the people out there are mostly emphasizing, I would say their audience definitely caters to new players looking to get into the hobby. And I think that is awesome. I think that is so necessary. Again, I did my work on them. I did my love with them, and they are my passion in a lot of ways. Just kind of getting into them. A few examples come to mind. Matt Coville, Dungeon Dudes, Mr. Rex. I understand that not all of these are going to be beginner introductories, but these are just sort of the ones that I've kind of clung on to and continue to cling on to as they come out with videos. And things going on. There have been some channels that I've followed and kind of dropped off of over time. I used to follow XP to level 3. I used to follow RuneSmith. Don't get me wrong, very funny content creators, of course. I don't think there's anything to debate there. But definitely get the impression that the emphasis of their channels are in a lot of ways on the social courtesies of the hobby, whereas I really want to focus on the technical aspects of engaging in the hobby without getting into data sheets and getting into the statistical nonsense that I think a lot of channels could do. Pack Tactics comes to mind. Excellent channel. Definitely not what we're going to be doing here. We're not going to be going into the math here. Unless you're just on this channel and you like dealing with the math. But that's not for me. So, definitely want to get a little bit into my personal history with tabletop games. I started playing, when I started playing is harsh, because it was kind of a false start. I was brought on by a friend around the middle school years to play the Pathfinder role-playing game, and I rolled up a paladin. I kind of followed the general sequence of events, but looking back, I realized I had no idea what was going on because I had no idea how to play. And when the game was kind of explained to me, it was lacking a context for me to understand it and grasp onto it. Thankfully, later in my high school career, I was reintroduced to it from the context of, a theater student, drama, plays, the like. And with that kind of established and under my belt, I was able to understand the concept of group improvisation, creating a character, having abilities, and making choices based on what's going on with that newfound context. And I think that allowed me to give the hobby a second shot. And I have to say, all early dungeon masters are great and terrible, myself included, including my probably one of my best friends. Really, no question there. But he was pretty new to it when he started being our game master, because it was Pathfinder, I believe. And I rolled up my paladin, half orc paladin Malachi, follower of the Forge God Torag. It's Torag. Man, that just really kicked it all off there. I fell in love with it. Met some really new people, fairly. And I've forged some of my deepest friendships in the hobby of Dungeons and Dragons. I've played extensively. I've one shots included. I could easily say I've rolled up 30, 40 characters. Now I'm not some 50-year player who's been playing this game with 150, 200, 500 characters under my belt. I'm not rolling a new character up every week. I'm playing two, sometimes 3 times a week with friends. We play in person. I generally do not play online. I have tried it in the past, and we can get into my experiences with that later. But most of my experience is in person, and I can say that I feel most comfortable really just sitting at the table. I like to do both, but I think my problem is I like to do both in that I think it would be my preference to be a player one day of the week and then a game master another day of the week. And it's not, both roles have something very, very unique to offer. Curating an experience and then experiencing a curated thing are two very different kind of acts. But today we are going to be going into concepts of world building. This may not be the only situation in which we jump into that topic of conversation, but this is how we're going to be jumping into this process. We're going to see how this works. We're going to see if we like it, and if we like it, then we're going to keep doing it. That, and if the viewership is there, because otherwise, why bother? I say that, and I'm about to have probably 10 viewers dropping in and out over the course of the next hour or so. But we'll see how it goes. So, GMing, DMing, game mastering. That's kind of where we're at right now. So let me explain kind of my history with that. Yes, I have run one-shots in the past. I've run a few. I want to say 3 or 4, not many. But each one, I think, definitely offered a very specific series of lessons and kind of things to turn around and kind of improve your craft for the next kind of run. I have campaigned 2 games, full-length campaigns, and when I say full-length campaign, to me that is over a year. That I would say is like full length. Obviously, our definitions might vary pretty widely with that, and that's okay. That's okay. But I've game mastered for Pathfinder, and then I've game mastered for Starfinder. Obviously, wildly different settings. I made the decision to integrate both campaigns into a single setting that take place at different times, which I think was definitely for the benefit of definitely for the benefit of keeping my longtime players really intrigued with what's going on instead of just trying to start fresh. And I frankly haven't come up with an idea yet that doesn't feel valid in the context of my one setting, which kind of leads me to segue to the fact that I will be beginning a third campaign here pretty soon, and is actually the subject of inspiration for videos like this, because I can say without a doubt I have not contributed more hours, more dedicated thought and meticulation and articulation in this world building, and the cruel irony of it, it's still the same setting. I'm going into my third campaign again in the Pathfinder role-playing game. This will be a pre-sequel event transpiring, and kind of why I refer to winter so much, because it will take place in a let's see if I can get this right, post-apocalyptic steampunk fantasy. Yeah, post-apocalyptic steampunk fantasy. So that's what you're looking at here. That is the beast that several years of creative conditioning can kind of bring to your campaign setting. But all of that aside, we're going to, in our conversation, really begin at the beginning. And I should also clarify that with this ridiculous well of experience that I'm definitely trying to impart onto my viewers, one viewer in this case, thank you, one viewer, I really want to open up the conversation to those tougher questions of the mechanics of world building. Again, I've learned so much just from helping friends create characters with backstories that go way beyond even my own personal investment, and I am so passionate about the subject and its creative efforts. Hey, it's Nick, my man Nick. I see you over there. Hype. That's great. So with that, with a little bit of history out of the way, let's talk about where to begin. Right. So, where to begin with your world building specifically? To clarify, when I'm asking that question, I mean that in the context of a completely unique setting, one in which you are completely fabricating everything that is supposed to exist in the world. This could be, going from, it's really just the way in which any new lore that you're familiar with and enjoy is articulated. The Witcher, is a setting with its own unique lore, completely unique to Dungeons and Dragons, which is fairly unique to Pathfinder, which is fairly unique to Underworld and Star Wars and Star Trek, and so on and so forth. So where do these worlds come from, and why do we begin with kind of acknowledging this difference? It's because the objective of creating your own setting is to develop themes that are important to you and that you value as a player. Hey there, Dragon Craze. I don't think I've ever seen you on here. It's good to see you. So asking these first questions, where to begin, you want to develop your own themes, and you want to answer questions creatively to the best of your ability, that are going to sort of bend into those themes, and you really want the focus to be on creating context around the things that are going to differentiate your world from the from any other world. A very good example of this, we'll use The Witcher as an example. So when the author of The Witcher was asking the question, okay, what if monsters existed in the world? Like, what if we took the real life context of human beings as we understand them, as difficult, ambitious, selfish, dirty, sexual creatures? You know, what do we do when we take that and import it into a context that we're more adjusted to understanding from a more Tolkienistic standpoint of high fantasy, you know, low sexual, high moralistic, highly polarized morality, you know, and how do we, and what does that mean for everything going on around them? So not just how do the things around people change as a result of people existing, but how does this fantasy environment change as a result of people being inserted into it? And there are really complex and intriguing answers to those questions, because you have the creation of the Witchers, which is completely unique unto itself. You know, the creation, the advent of mutagens and those enhanced senses and combating monsters. That is something that we really don't think about much in our D&D games, because, you know, it's just kind of assumed that there are heroes out there that can rise to the occasion and kill monsters. But, you know, the authors and creator of The Witcher asks, well, you know, humans and elves and dwarves are not physically capable of taking on these creatures, and people are going to die and live in hellscape of post-apocalyptic fantasy medieval torment without the advent or creative context behind creating Witchers, which are, you know, obviously a huge development in, you know, world building that, you know, the Witcher author would not have been able to come to unless he said, okay, let's take something I understand and then let's twist it. Let's give it a little shimmy, right? Because of course at the time, Tolkien, very easy to understand, very, very, very understandable, and digestible. Human beings separately, you know, human nature. I should probably say more generally, human nature, a lot more consumable, a lot more, digestible in its own context. But with that said, lost my train of thought there for a second. With that said, if what he basically did was combine these two factors in such a way where people could, or where he could ask additional questions in order to facilitate something deeper and richer, and eventually he came out with his own lore, his own setting. You know, people can theoretically become, you know, Witcher scholars and know everything about the lore that there is to know, because some fundamental questions were asked. So where do you begin with your world building? Well, how are you going to make something that everybody understands different? How are you going to make the thing that everybody already understands thoroughly and kind of put it on its head? That's where to begin. That is where you start. I definitely had it very easy this time. I had it very easy this time, where in my world building I wanted to say, okay, You know, I have at the end of one story a cosmic war basically take place. Just to summarize, how do I contextualize the events for the next 50 years and then build, a society that wants to live and wants to succeed after these crazy cosmic events? That is, I wanted to communicate a world that was on the brink of destruction, on the brink of total annihilation, surviving really merely by the thread of itself. And so I had to ask questions that followed that. How do I take that concept that I already had, that was already well established, and curve it in such a fashion where I had to ask myself new questions? And the thing is, your setting is not going to feel any more unique than the number of questions you have to ask yourself in order to build it any further. So that's really a great principle just in general to go by with world building. How many questions are you asking? Are you asking, a few questions about that inevitably deviate to some pale imitation of, another setting that you're familiar with? Okay, well, first of all, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's completely up to your preferences. But if you're in a situation like I am usually in, and where you really potentially want to be as an audience member, you have to ask probably hundreds of questions. I mean, these could be very simple questions, ranging from, what colors would these factions, wear on their persons? What would their, emblems look like? Why would their emblems look that way? And I think that most content creators, especially in the YouTube scene, really want to see you not go down the rabbit hole, because it's a cold place. It's cold and it's lonely down the rabbit hole. But maybe world building is a part of the hobby. Maybe you like to build and paint the minis and don't care so much about making them fight. For my 40K viewers, maybe it's just really about the journey, So we're getting into that. But you have to take your medium into consideration. What does that mean? Well, you are also world building, theoretically, in the context of 4 to 6 to 8, maybe more, maybe fewer players, who are also human beings, who are also trying to get something completely separate out of the game than you are. And frankly, all of that work, all of that world building, all of that is not going to mean anything unless you can contextualize it in the sense that the players are as tied into it as you are, which is the challenge of world building, because I'm sorry, but good luck getting your players as invested in world building as you are, especially if you're asking those hundreds of questions, because I can promise you your players are not asking that many questions. But that's not really the point. The point is to try. The fun and the pleasure is in trying. Hey, how invested can we get our players into our world building? Well, we do that quite simply by knowing where to stop world building. And wow, stop world building after I just went into that. How do we do that? Well, the The problem is in the answer, and the answer isn't the problem. Because Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Starfinder, etc. are ultimately cooperative storytelling experiences. That is almost exactly how it was presented to me when I first started, and that still reigns true in my opinion. And world building, lore building, all of those components are all extremely relevant to player behavior, to backstory writing, which for those who might play with less familiar players, it's going to be something that you are going to have a very hard time reconciling if you don't know where to stop world building. So, what do I mean by that? With other voices in your game, there will be voices on your world. A good example, when I was world building for my Starfinder game, obviously multiple planets and space travel were all components, and they were all totally relevant. So what I basically did was I built out and I kitted out very broad paint strokes onto the world in order to give myself some breathing room, because I absolutely knew that building a galaxy or a sector of a galaxy or even a solar system, if I really wanted to go that narrow, would have been exceedingly difficult. I mean, there's a reason there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of lore in all the most popular setting books that you can go back and collect and read, because you can potentially write that much content. And I think the reason that I generally don't gravitate towards pre-written content is because you as a player are going to feel written into a wall. Okay, so in my setting, in my third setting, it's called Brimscape. In my third setting, I have numerous towns of varying sizes. They already have names. They already have gimmicks and shticks would probably be the most appropriate word for that. So with all of these cities and towns and whatever already built out, I've definitely in some ways put my players in a box. I have to ask them, well, where's your character from? And then they say, well, I want to be from a big city. I want to be from a big town. It's like, okay, well, here's all the big cities and big towns in the world. And then, they could just as easily look at that and say, oh, well, I don't like that. I don't like those. It's like, well, dude, those are the towns in the world. So if you want to be from a town, you got to pick one. Like tough noodles, unfortunately. Man, and that is so hard. I hate doing that. But unfortunately, it's kind of a necessary evil, depending on what your goals are when you're world building. And in my particular goals with this particular setting, I really wanted to have a lot of established, friend-center hard content. And you may have noticed this in your own world building, but players can go and garble your content. Just throw it like in a rabbit hole of nonsense in which you're not the one asking questions, but your players are the ones kind of asking questions, and they're answering those questions in their backstories, and answering those questions in and they're answering those questions in a way that's not desirable of you, of what you want out of the world. A great example of that, I think, is honestly in a campaign I'm playing right now. I definitely took it upon myself as a player to take a lot of micro liberties with my PC on varying cultural things. Um, a good example, I'm playing a mountain dwarf in a 5th edition game, and one thing that I really wanted just to have really was a Russian accent. I like Russian accents in the context of dwarves, and less so Scottish. Mostly because I don't like doing a Scottish accent. I like doing a voice if I can. So I really wanted to do Russian, and I was playing a mountain dwarf. So I definitely implied in roleplay conversations, going down the line in those earlier sessions, that, oh, this is just what the mountain dwarves sound like. This is like an ethnic thing, or like a cultural thing. Geographic, that's the word, geographic. Liam Hillsman, yes. I am from the mountains, yes. See, the problem with that, while it was fun and it was cool, and I think me and the GM kind of got along really well with that, made it happen, because he's really experienced and good at what he does, and frankly, so am I. We rolled with it, and thank you, Cecil. My loyal viewer, my man, I love it. We're gonna switch sides here, so I can let the other half of my back kind of dry off. No, but, oh god, where was I going with that? Train of thought lost once again. I was totally ready to come in here and answer, complex world building questions, but every time I see a comment, I get derailed. So I'm like, man, maybe, dang. Oh well, you go, chat. Anywho, so the point being is that players can definitely come in and throw wrenches in your world building by taking their own world building questions and answering them kind of outside of your permission. And this is definitely something you need to be mindful of, and this is going to be the power of where to stop world building, because eventually you're going to get to a point where it's arduous and hard to answer microscopic, teeny tiny little questions. And I think this can perfectly be encapsulated, generally speaking, in the process of building towns in your world. I am not going to sit down and hand place, carve, and populate every single little habitat that can possibly exist in my world. I might have a mental population cap of 100, and I might populate every village with 100 people or more, but I'm never going to populate any habitat that's less than 100 people. So what that does is give creative license to players who want to create backstories that might not be something I considered, or might answer questions that I had not considered. Oh, what's that coordinates 36.145 by 12,337? I don't know. I have no idea. Unless there's a dot on the marker that says town, city, whatever, I have no idea. So go nuts. Maybe there's a cave with a dragon in it, and you are a lowly peasant on a rickety farm, and you found the dragon, and you befriended it, and it gave you magic powers. I don't know. That is all yours to take with and run with. But you can see where other aspects of world building need to cease as a result of just that very simple example. You don't need to completely contextualize and manifest every single dragon in your world. If you were to do this, you would really remove a lot of agency from your players, and your players are really a big part of the reason you're going out and doing this in the first place. So where do you stop role-playing? Or where do you stop role-playing? You never stop role-playing. But when do you stop world-building? You stop world-building when it starts putting PCs and players who are supposed to be in your game writing backstories into a corner. Because you didn't know who the PCs were before they were created by your players, and those PCs need a backstory to exist in prior to joining the company of your world. So yeah, there you go. That answers that question quite simply. So we know where to begin. Boy howdy, Dad Beard and Dragons. Hi there. That is a cool name. And unless you are a random person, which is totally plausible, I would guess that you are my good friend Zach, who has a very dad beard and likes dragons. Oh no, we like hedgehogs. Nope, I'm a rando. Well, welcome. So we've talked a little bit about where to begin world building, and to recap slightly, that essentially is just taking a concept, a pre-established concept, and asking a question that demands more questions answered. So it's gonna be war. It's a witch hunt. Burn the dad beard. God, let's not do that. Let's not burn our second viewer at the stake, please. But just to keep on rolling here, unless Dad Beard and Dragons, mind if I share a world map I just finished? Absolutely. That sounds like actually really cool. Yes, I don't know how to see it. Show viewers list. I don't know how to see it, but absolutely. World map I just finished. I love that. Mapping is actually such a beast of the hobby. I literally, I think everybody really likes some parts. Whispered it. Okay. Oh gosh, we're gonna have to learn how to look at those. Wow. Here I am thinking I had it all together with my activity feed. Man, we're really bad at this. Oh my gosh. Wow. Oh my gosh. I really want to look at this, and I'm dying right now because I cannot find how to look at whispers. I figured it would have been in chat. All it says is show viewers list. You know what? Let's jump onto my actual Twitch account. Maybe I can see it there. Ooh,
but at least to us,
that's it. I found it.
But at least to us.
Oh, hold on. We're gonna cut that off. I literally found it. That's so exciting.
When I first met her, I was...
Oh my gosh. Okay. Alright. Strive fast. Okay. So let's have a look here. Send it to your Twitch DM. Okay. Cool. And that is how we find that. That is super cool. Okay. Alright. So, alright, this is really interesting. So, I have found 100% that there are mainly two methods, and I actually know what this was made with Incarnate, wasn't it? I know that because I've used Incarnate, and I love it. Did you use the paid version? The free version. Okay, cool. So we're on the same page there. I love the free version. They give you so many tools. There's some things I wish they had free, like the maps option, or not maps option, roads. Really wish they'd let you just put a little like black dotted line to be roads, but anyway. So let's have a look here, and oh, where'd you go? Okay. So first of all, map building is a huge part of world building. Obviously, you're literally putting the world in a consumable medium for people to kind of get into. So sorry, just kind of getting as close a look as I can. Okay. I love how you genuinely made the effort to get that aesthetic of like, oh my gosh, that's a forest. Like, yeah, you see that and you're like, yeah, that's a forest, 100%. But so just to describe what I'm kind of seeing here with words. Interesting. Well, I definitely can appreciate that because I think everybody really has a starting point. And if you're going to, some people have to say, okay, well, what does the world look like? Okay, what does the world look like? Beginning question. Follow-up question. What is X like because the world is shaped like this? What is Y like because the world is shaped like this? Getting into a series of why questions is really, really critical to kind of keeping on going, but everybody has to start somewhere. So let's get into this world. So just to use, because I don't think I can actually show this off. Well, with your permission, we can certainly talk about it somewhat. We obviously won't do that if you don't want me to, and that would require me figuring out how to do it, which, I mean, good luck, right? Okay. Well, all right. Let's just kind of break down to. Man, I love these names, but I'm gonna have a really hard time pronouncing them, so please forgive me. So we have 5 continents. Looks like we have Celium, Gaia. Is that a C or a G? I can't tell what the. I think that's Draconok, or maybe Dragonok. There's Sunderskull. I love that, it's skull shape. And I'm gonna really screw this one up. Daiju Tairiku. Now, I think it's worth pointing out that I notice each one of these geological landmasses takes on an extremely unique shape, complete with water, kind of carving out a lot of the land. Starting players that emanates outward as I get more. Go back here. Emanates outward as I get more ideas, and players give me ideas. Players give me ideas. Window source to show it. There we go. Oh, there we go. Oh, that should be going. Well, maybe it's not. Seems like it is arguing with me a little bit. Ability capture. It's fighting me. I have a window source to show it if you want. Yes, I can do that. Tell you what we'll do. Wallpaper, game capture. Add layer. Browser source. Add. That. Right here. So we will. Well, we have kind of done some things here to screw this up slightly, but we will fix it. This is a process in motion. What did we? There we go. There we go. So we should go back. Add browser source. How does one? Paste link here. Easy. We're doing great. That's it. That is Oh, I see. I see. Oh, well, shoot. Sure. We're gonna figure this out, I promise. Just trying to find the right. Connect yourself to Google Drive. Let's connect to Google Drive. Man, this is fighting me, isn't it? Tell you what. Share. Nope. Can't get a. Actually. Share. Link copied. Why can I not? Man, this is fighting me. This is really fighting me, isn't it? Here's what we're going to do. We are going to save this. There we go. Then we are going to browse for a local HTML file, which should be Man, this is really fighting me, isn't it? Man, we really need to get better at this. Oh, because I really want to talk about this. Because it really delves into like the two philosophies of map design, which is, you know, without in any way being insulting, there's like you know, practical realism, and then there's usually like impractical, and I'll tie fantasy to that because there's usually some kind of fantastical reason for things to be kind of shaped and framed the way that they are. I know I downloaded this. Okay. So where is this? See all. Edit and create. There we go. Save as. We'll go to downloads. There we go. That's fine. Bam. This should open in downloads. Browse for a local HTML file. Well, let's check back in with chat. Ooh, so I do remember worlds thousands of years ago. There was something like a cosmic arcane atom bomb or solar flare that hit the world. Cataclysmic events are a very cool addition to kind of what you're seeing. Ooh. Shoot, there it is. Okay. The gods telling their peoples to gather together protected them, but in doing so only were able to protect certain areas of the originally Pangea-like continent. Okay, so that's really interesting that you go there, because human history and world building have really weird correlations that you'll find. And most of us who went to school who acknowledge Pangea are as a theory for how the world was as a single continent, usually try to kind of go from there as a starting point. So you definitely took a very rational realism approach to that, and I did the exact same thing with the very first setting that I created. The very first setting I created was a Pangea-like single continent, of which I am bringing back, but in a more shredded, destroyed way, and I actually did so much like you, in a way that was very irrational / fantasy esque, because magic and arcane forces had a lot to do, or divine or cosmic forces had as much to do with the creation of geography as your setting. But we'll go further into reading. When the calamity hit, it ripped the supercontinent apart into 5 smaller continents. I'm presumably most of it underwater, I would guess. need to go. Got to set up for session tonight. Good day, Nick. I'm sorry if I missed you because I was fiddling on the computer and not watching chat. Great Steve, thanks for some of the advice. Yeah, okay. I mean, he's probably gone now, unfortunately, but we'll keep reading because I love having this basis to go off of that we can discuss. And the gods, for thousands of years, kept up their protection to keep their people safe from the arcane fallout. So I'm imagining something I mean, you say fallout, my mind immediately goes to nuclear radiation or something like to that extent with an arcane kind of flavoring, which, for the record, sourcing your materials definitely doesn't have to extend to the genre of the subject. One of my main inspirations in terms of content creation has always been Fallout, and the whole Fallout series, because I just love the tone and the environmental storytelling, on top of the fact that it's just got a lot of really fun mechanics to throw into your game. Like Arcane Fallout, I think is a really brilliant way to kind of seek out derivative inspiration, like Fallout, like the Fallout game series, for inspiring your creative process. But anyway, moving on. Now the gods have said it's more or less safe now and have released their protection. So I guess that would imply. So what's really interesting about that is because now you can start asking questions in your world building about not one place, but 5 places. And of course you can go as deep as you like. But now you're in a situation where you have these 5 continents of which you have to world build, several different facets of, and then you have to put them all together. And I love that that sort of inciting incident of new and interesting and different places that you fleshed out coming together and interacting, kind of seeing where the drama and where the conflict is, because the story is what's really critical to your players and the D&D experience, whereas the world building is obviously the fun part for us, right? So I'm gonna read further on. Now, as there are lower levels of this arcane radiation in the world, where originally there were only commonly beasts, constructs, giants, humanoids, and plant creatures, monstrosities and aberrations are now coming into existence for the first time. Wow. Okay, so that's also really interesting. Like, let's incite discord. Ooh, hold on. I want to get into this too. Also, dungeons are naturally forming from concentrations of the arcane energies, and all continents believe all other continents were completely destroyed. Interesting. I think that is a highly logical conclusion to come to for the denizens of each continent. You're definitely going to want to ask questions about what is going to incite these groups to explore and find each other, if that's what you want them to do. You might just want 5 pleasant settings, technically on the same astral body, to have campaigns at your whim. But I do think it's a very compelling question of, at what point do people say, well, what if there is something else out there? I mean, we do the same thing here on planet Earth, as we, go on and explore the stars. I mean, we're still looking for intelligent life. So it really makes one wonder, okay, when do people start getting on a boat and exploring and traveling, and hoping they don't die or get obliterated. Other continents. Wow. Okay, I really like that. Now the way you're speaking about it in future tense, so what that tells me is that it seems to be in the storytelling development phase of the discovery of these other continents, which is really interesting, because you can definitely blow out the picture for your party mid-campaign in terms of scale very quickly with that, which world exposure should definitely be something you consider when you're creating your campaigns. Some people really like to start their campaigns in a really grounded context, where they're only going through like a very local area. Now, local for you could be, one continent. In a sci-fi setting, it might be one planet. Um, in my case, it might be one country on a world on a landmass of multiple countries. But ultimately, you have to be very delicate in how you upscale your adventure for your players, because if they're going into a situation at second or third level, they've probably done all of the legwork on their own to establish themselves in kind of the setting you've established for them, which would be this single continent. And you're very quickly opening the door to other parts of the world that they're completely unfamiliar with. It's a really great concept in terms of building really foreign adventures and really introducing like weird cultures to them, and it kind of puts your party all on the same team if they're all part of like a single united culture. That's really great storytelling ammunition to get your party together. You just have to be very careful to make sure that everywhere they go is engaging and interesting, even though they as a party are not personally invested in it. And it's totally plausible. It's just a matter of making sure they're given the breathing room to explore, and making sure they have something to find when they go exploring. That is kind of, I guess, what I have to say regarding that. But kind of taking a step back, talking about the actual world building kind of on your own, sitting down and doing it all. You have started with great geography. Ooh, we have a mountain of text. Thank you, by the way, for taking the time to write this out. I can tell you're extremely passionate, and I love that. I love the idea of building this community of just really passionate world builders. So let's get into it. Each continent also has its own demographic of peoples. Guys, primarily standard humans. All right, run of the mill fantasy makes sense. Extremely diluted bloodlines. Devils or celestials on this. I really like that you've asked the greater like racial questions, because I mean, it's really hard to it's really easy to justify multiple intelligent races. Celium has elves, gnomes, furballs. Why do I keep goblinoids like goblins, hobgoblins? Okay, so that actually makes sense. So the twisting actually makes sense because of your lore and this kind of Pangea theory that you brought to the table, because obviously multiple sentient creatures would have been kind of on these arcs, if you will. Reptilian races. So you've really honestly done a lot of the work racially, in terms of a game with multiple races of intelligent creatures. Okay. So this is actually one of those interesting points where you might have kind of done this on your own, but in terms of putting yourself slightly in a corner, depending on again the timeline of how you want to do your storytelling, and kind of the point where you have to start asking yourself, what are my players going to start throwing at me? Well, having your world building established in this way racially, your players are going to open up their core rulebook and they're going to say, okay, what races can I play? And obviously it's going to be of some mode of confusion if they feel like they can play. Now this is something you're going to have to clarify. Hey, this is my world. These are the playable races in the world. So you're really going to have to kind of do this give and take situation, where it's, hey, this is on this continent. You're starting on this continent. Nobody really knows these continents exist. And unfortunately, because you have to acknowledge context and consequences to your world building decisions, you do have to say, okay, well, if all of my animal races, live on one continent, and a whole other continent has most of my reptilian races. Well, that probably means that if my campaign's going to start on a continent that does not have these races, how can I have players be those races if they want to be? So you'd either have to just really lay down the law here and say, hey, these just aren't playable races. You might run into them, but currently you're not in a context where they could join the party at this point in time. Or you kind of make that room for exceptions, which I know can be exceedingly difficult because I've had to do it before. I say had to. I have a player who is quite the challenge, actually, in terms of creating rather unique concepts. Emily, if you watch this is the shout out to you. So she created for me, if you're familiar at all with the Starfinder setting, there's big lizard people called Vesk, and then there's humans, and they don't interbreed like in any sexual context whatsoever. To the actual credit of the lore. Ads, go away. I want royalty-free music. Go away. Anyway. So, I basically had to create like a half alien, half human hybrid thing that did not really exist or make any sense in the context of the world that I was creating. But creating an exception to your rule can actually be a door to asking more questions and more world building. You're really not losing anything by having an exception. It's just something you have to really take into intimate consideration, because it's my personal belief as a game master that it's really your priority to make sure your players are having fun. That's not to say it's your sole responsibility, but weak GMing and unconfident GMing and a GM who isn't having fun is going to blow back on the players one way or the other. So if you don't derive pleasure from your players enjoying themselves, you get it. But if you're not deriving pleasure from your players having a good time, and if your players have a good time by making weird stuff that doesn't really make sense, you kind of have to ride that line. Totally willing to come up with reasons if they want to play one of those other races. Okay, but obviously you've done the role-playing thing. You know that that's just another rabbit hole to jump into, and I mean that's kind of a part of the fun, right? It's like, okay, how do I make like a half alien human thing plausible? Okay, what do we do with that? What are the consequences? Oh god. Losing it in my throat. Been talking for an hour straight. Context and consequences in world building can very generally be interchangeable, because you're really just establishing something, making a decision. It could just have to do with the forming of a dungeon. Someone got caught in the influx of arcane power and was transferred to the other continent automatically. Honestly, that is totally plausible. That is one of honestly many plausible solutions. Just to spitball, you could. I mean, I used the Hamlet metaphor before. You might not have every single civilization, every single, population kind of sussed out in your setting, and if you do that, then you're probably gonna honestly suffer from, again, backing your players into a corner here. There could be a small tribe of lizard folk. I mean, less than 50 in a tribe in a cave network somewhere, just chilling out because maybe they got lucky and, 5 of them were living in a cave when, your world lord, divine cosmic powers kind of protected them, and now they're a little baby tribe in the continent where they're otherwise not found. There's so many ideas. I mean, and that's just one. Yours is another. I mean, it can just go kind of on and on there, right? But again, sussing out, where your players are having a good time is ultra critical in their backstory writing process, and kind of acknowledging consequences of their choices should honestly, in a way, for the world builder, be fun. I think title cuts out. Let's talk world. Oh wow. Oh no, we are not talking about World of Warcrafting, and that really sucks that the title cut out. No, not doing the World of Warcraft today. No, we are about world building. We are about the academic process of world building, because we love the mechanics of it. We love the math of it, and it is a jolly old time, frankly. No, absolutely. Actually, I have a little note here, and that's so funny. The question of race, the racial question came up in world building, because I have a note here, integrating backstory into world building, and integrating world building into PC motivation. Absolutely, 100%. I think a lot of people get really so many pieces of culture. No, that's so absolutely true. But it really comes back to the beginning of, let's ask a question. Let's set us up. What if this was like this? What if human beings united under a single federation? Okay. Well, if human beings on planet Earth united into the Federation of Worlds, yeah, and it really needs to, particularly in the D&D sphere. I will say that I think law and chaos are really important elements to consider in your civilization. Hiking, guns, beer, and food. How do they grow up, though? No, and that's so critical. And that's something that maybe a smart and competent player who likes to world building might do for you in some instances. Sometimes that's something you can jump into on your own. I definitely like to touch on that with more established societies. Knowing, for example, if I have a human society that's democratic in nature, and they're engaging in things like capitalism, while races be versatile in their... See, I find that statement incredibly poignant for the simple fact that, the way every race is written in 5th edition, it sounds like anybody could really be anything. They're like, well, they kind of tend towards this way, but they're mostly that way. You really can't make broad-reaching things beyond the factual, racial traits of fantasy races in a lot of contexts, especially in tabletops. Mostly because your players will almost always want to be some kind of exception, which is what makes a great hero. Exceptions make great heroes. That is a great tool of advice to go by. I think that's definitely true. Very few generalizations that make sense. Duergar being so grumpy. Yeah, the actual setting itself, I definitely think when you're making decisions for certain aspects of things, you can't narrow yourself down and be too specific or too generous in characterizing people who are intelligent, and they vary extremely widely. a good example is the fairly common trope that I've been exposed to, but maybe you haven't. The half orc or orc paladin is definitely one such hero archetype exception I see a lot. Because generally settings like to build orcs out to be kind of more on the savage side, tribal, maybe honor bound, but like more battle focused in that respect. But a lot of people like to kind of subvert those expectations. Let's go. Ooh. Okay. So my man Dadbeard, and I think this is a really important note as well. Culture is really something that's easy to be. I think it's easy to derive for fun, like aesthetics. I know for a fact I've done. Oh, what? Oh, whoopsie. Not trying to pause chat there. Whoopsie. Anyway, for all the times where I can definitely say that I love aesthetics to certain things, I could have made different or better choices in my world building to better reflect the conditions and habitats of the people in my games. For example, I do have kind of a subsect of orcs geographically kind of located further away from society, but their culture and their value in intellectualism and the arts makes them much more probably Romanesque. Oh gosh, I can't figure out that word. It's an M word. It's an M word. Like very Macedonian, very Greco, very aesthetic. Aesthetic would be the word. They, this culture of orcs will absolutely have, innately ornately carved. There it is. Will most likely have ornately carved statues, prominent artists. Their leader will probably not be a warrior or a general or even something remotely comparable to, even like a president or a congressperson. No, the leader of this society would probably be some manner of diplomat, right? Because they'll be articulate, they'll be wise, they'll probably be charismatic, because these are the things that the society values, and the aesthetic of the Macedonian Greco-Roman people didn't go to that society in my game, which it absolutely should have, but it went to instead a human society that unfortunately, I took a lot of the military aspects of Roman culture, legionaries and the armor and the kind of general aesthetic and whatnot, and kind of put that on a society that it didn't really make a lot of sense. It didn't really make a lot of sense because I didn't contextualize that society in the same way that Rome is contextualized in human history, and that's basically as the inheritor of early human culture, because Rome was and is culture, in the world really, at this point for the most part. So why did I do that? Obviously my biases are going to come into play there. Someone who is trying to make the exact same world but is natively Chinese and raised Chinese his entire life might come with completely different aesthetics for, a highborn intellectual orcish society and militaristic human society. I mean, those would look probably completely different in the eyes of even as narrow a scope as they, might deal with in a similar world building circumstances. Oh, I see this comment here. Again, a World of Warcraft thing, but ogres had a Roman theme, though they definitely could have done better, mixing Roman with barbaric themes. Think general clothing, like what Zagreus has in Hades' game. Still looks very ancient Greek, but the skulls really add something. And if you're really starting out and you don't really want to go down the rabbit hole, I definitely love the idea of just keeping things aesthetic. I've done plenty of that in my time. Because, I mean, if something looks cool, it looks cool. And I think it's a lot easier to get away with that especially when you're starting out, but especially if you're dealing in a medium that is so visual. World of Warcraft being a video game is a pretty obvious example. Because if you have something to just show, and it's immediately appealing to the eye, and immediately you're kind of thrust upon with the gameplay, people really aren't going to be asking those deeper questions of, okay, well, why do these ogres have armor that's shaped this way, colored this way, etc. In a drawing, and I've been collecting lots of inspirational art regarding me redoing WoW races. Because it's hard to find artists I really like. No, I get that. Yeah, honestly, you should be your favorite artist. Be your favorite artist. That is where you want to act. Because honestly, that's kind of what got me into dungeon mastering for a long time. Because I started out playing, like most people start out playing in the hobby, playing before they game master. And again, while I loved my game master at the time, there was always part of me a little kind of scratching neck thing that was like, wow, I could probably do this better, this little aspect better. I could probably do this little aspect better. I was like, oh well, I kind of like this is cool, but what if we changed tones or had different characters telling different stories? What if things were darker? What if things were lighter, etc., etc. Again, it all comes back to asking those root questions. And I eventually got to the point where I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I have to take the plunge. I have to become a game master, dungeon master, whatever. I have to, because if I don't, well, then I'll be asking these questions and never get answers. And I jumped right into it, and it sucked. It was awful. See, my, you'd get along very well with a friend of mine. He is very much into, definitely like the strong female orc, vibe. 3 sites combined. Yeah. That is honestly an amazing question. Again, become your favorite artist. I mean, you can get into it and you can make it happen. I do find creatively it's really easy to hit walls. It's really easy to hit walls when you're finding yourself battling conventions, because unfortunately, while most artists would like to deny it, there are rules. And if you break those rules, you're going to alienate your audience a little bit. It's, I mean, I could think of numerous examples, but I guess in the context of art and drawing, particularly, like specifically with nude art, for example, you are going to alienate a lot of people who just don't want to see nude art for any reason. It's just not their thing, they're uncomfortable with it, etc. But if you're willing to kind of accept oh my gosh, dying over here, just dying. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm distracting you. Jeez. Kill it, man, kill it. Get in there and make it happen. Pale or demonic red in their eyes, add small teachers. Man, wow, there you go. Skill of an artiste. I love it. I love hearing people talk about just their craft and what they're passionate about. Because I mean that's kind of what we're here to do. Talk about passion and craft and kind of making it happen. 100%. Man, so pushing it on. Wow. Okay, so holy crap. So we're an hour and 20 minutes in. I meant to end this around the 9 o'clock mark, so that I could put it on YouTube and it not be devastatingly long for anybody who didn't want to watch an hour and 20 minute long video. But here we are. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it quits. To the two people who are still here, first of all, wow, thank you for hearing me talk about my love and my craft. Thank you for the follow. You're a Chad. You're awesome. I know. I will say I had a blast doing this, so we will definitely be doing this again. I will probably be on stream doing a lot of like video game gameplay. You'll see all my previous stuff is all video games, but I really love this, so I'm definitely gonna come back to this. So more to come. Again, if you know, I'm assuming Dadbeard is viewer number 2. I appreciate you for coming in and contributing as much as you did. I love your map. It was a great basis of our conversation. And wow, yeah, to my YouTube people, Chaos Gaming 234, thank you so much for showing out and watching this whole video. And to my stream people, you guys have an amazing night. Thank you. Good day and good night.